There comes a moment that every narcissist must face, no matter how desperately they try to escape it, the moment when the world stops listening, and the only voice left echoing inside them is the sound of their own emptiness. No more praise, no more trusting eyes, no more audience for the performance they once lived their whole life perfecting. Only themselves, bare, exhausted, and trapped among the shattered pieces of the illusion they built. But what they feel in that moment is not remorse. Their regret carries no tears, no awareness, no compassion. It is more like a shiver that runs through them when they suddenly lose the mirror that once reflected the feeling of being alive. What they miss is not you. It is the sense of power they once felt when you believed in them, loved them, and looked at them through human, empathetic eyes. For them, love was never the meeting of two souls. It was a stage illuminated by your gaze. They played the role of the gentle one, the understanding one, the ideal partner, not to connect, but to keep their mask from falling. And when you began to awaken, when you stopped reflecting, stopped applauding, stopped forgiving, the stage lights went out, leaving them in a darkness they have no idea how to live with. Jung once said, "No light is strong enough to dispel darkness if a person still refuses to look into it." The narcissist has spent their entire life living off borrowed light, especially yours. But when you withdraw your energy, when you stop being their power source, the truth appears. They never had light of their own, only reflection. And when that reflection disappears, they no longer know who they are. This is not a story about revenge, nor about divine justice. It is the simplest law of the universe. Energy must return to where it was sent from. Those who betray genuine love will soon be haunted by the very coldness they once sowed. And their regret is not a sign of transformation. It is the final echo of a soul realizing, too late, that what they once despised was the only thing that ever made them feel human. Today, we will dive into that journey, not to pity them, but to understand something deeper. Sometimes, the universe's punishment does not come as fire, but as the extinguishing of the very light they once stole. Part 1. The illusion of love. When the mirror begins to crack, when a narcissist enters your life, everything begins too beautifully to question. They seem to understand you instantly, from the way you go quiet when hurt to the way you smile to hide your worries. They remember every little thing you like, every story you share, every fear you try to conceal. They know exactly what to say. "I've never met anyone like you," or "I understand you in ways no one else ever could." And so you believe you've met someone who truly sees you. But later you realize they didn't understand you. They studied you like a formula to be memorized. A narcissist doesn't seek love. They seek fuel for their ego. In the beginning, they're obsessed with you, not because of who you are, but because of how you make them feel powerful, desirable, special. When you admire them, they feel alive. When you share your pain, they play the savior to feel superior. They absorb every detail about you, not to grow closer, but to use it against you later. Every secret you reveal, your fear of abandonment, your insecurity, your memories of betrayal, becomes a button they'll press when they need to regain control. In this love, you loved with your heart. They loved with strategy. When you laughed, they felt validated. When you cried, they felt important because whether it's affection or anger, you're still focused on them. The more you react, the more alive they feel. They need you the way an addict needs a fix of validation. Without your attention, their world goes dim. The first crack in the illusion comes quietly. One day you notice that the person who once noticed every small detail suddenly seems cold. Messages become less frequent. Phrases like "I'm busy" or "you're overreacting" start repeating. They begin to test you, withdrawing a little, speaking harshly, going silent for days, then returning as if nothing happened. And when you react, they smile inwardly, reassured that they still have you under control. Their love has a rhythm, warm, cold, close, distant. You find yourself constantly adjusting, trying to get it right to bring back their tenderness. You start editing your words, suppressing emotions, avoiding conflict. You shrink a little more each day just to keep the relationship from collapsing. But in truth, there was never a we. There was only you loving, hoping, trying while they performed a role. Narcissists are masters of emotional attachment, weaving intimacy and withdrawal into a powerful spell. One day, they make you feel like a soulmate. The next, they look at you like a stranger. This contradiction confuses your mind. You cling to the good moments to explain away the bad ones. That's trauma bonding. They make you addicted to the relief of being loved again after being abandoned. Behind their confident mask lies deep fear. They fear being truly seen, judged as unworthy or abandoned. When you love them sincerely, your love doesn't comfort them, it terrifies them. Because to receive love, they'd have to admit they once lacked it. They can't bear that vulnerability, so they attack, control, or withdraw instead. In truth, much of what they do doesn't come from deliberate evil, but from the survival reflex of a wounded ego. They cannot stand ordinariness, because to them, ordinary means worthless. They crave drama, victory, and control. The easiest way to feel powerful is to make someone else insecure, especially the one who loves them. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." The narcissist does exactly that. They cannot face their own shame, so they make you feel ashamed. They cannot bear feeling worthless, so they make you feel not enough. They pour into you everything they reject in themselves, then despise you for carrying it. If you've ever loved someone like this, you know the inner conflict, loving and resenting them at the same time, wanting to leave but feeling you can't. A part of you keeps believing that the person they were in the beginning, the kind, attentive, loving one, still exists somewhere. But the brutal truth is, that person never existed. They were simply mirroring you, your warmth, empathy, and hope. Eventually, the cracks in the mirror grow too wide to ignore. They start to despise your patience, mock your kindness, and get bored with the very goodness they once praised. And one quiet day, you realize the most painful truth of all. You're no longer in love with the person you've been holding onto an illusion. And when you finally stop holding, stop reacting, stop explaining, stop crying, the mirror shatters. They lose you, but deeper than that. They lose the beautiful reflection that only you ever made them believe they had. And that is the beginning of the regret they will never admit. Chapter 2. The Betrayal Cycle. When betrayal isn't the end, but the survival mechanism of darkness, a narcissist doesn't betray you because you're not good enough. They betray you because they fear the truth that they are incapable of genuine love. In love, sincerity makes them feel exposed, and trust makes them feel weak. Betrayal, therefore, isn't an accident in their story. It's a built-in defense system to avoid facing themselves. It all follows a familiar pattern: idealization, devaluation, discard, hoovering. At first, they idealize you as if you are their salvation. They gaze at you with near religious adoration, making you believe you're the one. But they're not in love with you. They're in love with the feeling of power you give them. When you admire them, they are resurrected from their inner mediocrity. Then the cracks begin to show. You start asking questions, seeking real connection, wanting reciprocity. That's when they panic. The moment you lift your head, they feel their control slipping. So they begin to devalue you not because you changed, but because they must reassert dominance. A cutting remark, a subtle jab, a cold silence, each is a test to see if you'll still stay. Every cruel act is a measurement of power. If you react, they feel secure. If you're hurt, they feel significant. Because to them, love isn't harmony, it's a battlefield between power and fear. As Carl Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, love is lacking." In a relationship with a narcissist, this becomes painfully clear. They cannot tolerate being truly loved because real love demands disarmament, vulnerability, and authenticity. To them, that means losing control, so the moment you begin to see them, they choose betrayal. It's their way of regaining power, their way of avoiding exposure. Their long silences aren't about needing space. They're experiments to see how long before you panic. They're small betrayals, a vague message, a casual lie aren't accidents but tests. Will you still forgive them? If you do, they push further. If you protest, they twist the story until you feel guilty. This is the art of control, a cruel cycle you don't even realize you're trapped in. To them, betrayal isn't loss, it's recalibration. It restores their illusion of independence and superiority. Each act of betrayal proves they can't be hurt. But paradoxically, every betrayal exposes the fragility they try to hide. They betray to feel powerful, yet each time they grow emptier, lonelier, and more afraid. And so the loop continues. They create chaos to escape their inner fear, then fear the chaos they've created. They run from love because it demands honesty, yet crawl back because they can't survive without someone to make them feel special. With them, relationships never end with goodbye. They only pause when you stop supplying fuel. What they don't understand is this. Every time they betray you, they peel away another layer of their own mask. Every lie, every calculated silence, every counterfeit embrace, all of it reveals their deepest fear, losing control over the image they project. And when you finally withdraw your love, the only thing that ever made them appear human, their illusion collapses completely. Because in that moment, they must face the truth they've avoided all their lives. They were never strong, never loving, and never truly alive, only performing. Chapter 3. The Collapse. When your silence becomes the final word. A narcissist's collapse doesn't happen in one loud moment. It isn't an explosion. It's a quiet cracking bit by bit, clearer with each passing day. It begins when you stop reacting, when you no longer fall into the familiar emotional traps, when you no longer need to be understood. In the instant you choose peace over being right, their story starts to unravel like rotten cloth. At first, they don't notice. They think you're playing hard to get, testing them, or waiting to be pulled back in. They believe a single text, a certain look, a sprinkle of sweetness will soften you again. But day after day, you don't return. They call, no answer. They post happy photos, you don't react. They tell people they've moved on, yet inside, what they feel is a vast emptiness where you once were, and even more, where the version of themselves you once reflected and believed in used to live. Your silence doesn't just confuse them, it dissolves them. For a narcissist, existence depends on someone still thinking of them, mentioning them, reacting to them. When you leave the game, you take with you the audience, the stage, and the lights they fed on. They are left alone in a dark room where the only noise is their real voice, faint and distorted. This is when many narcissists experience what psychologists call narcissistic mortification, the death of the grandiose self-image. When every mask drops and there's no one left to blame or manipulate, they have to look at themselves. What they see is not a victim of circumstance, but someone who destroyed every beautiful thing that came near them. Yet instead of enduring that pain and learning to repair, they run. They seek a new supply, another person, to reflect back the image they lost. But this time the magic doesn't work. They still know how to say charming words, still know how to act captivating, but they lack what you once brought, truth. The new person may admire them, but doesn't see through them. And that is precisely why they never feel as alive as they did with you. With you, they were seen as a human being. With others, they are only a role. Deep down, they know it. They remember your gaze not flattering, not fearful, but steady, as if it could see the parts they were hiding. They remember the feeling of touching the piece in you, something they cannot imitate. And that is when real regret begins to gnaw. Not regret for losing you, but because they can't return to the one place that ever made them feel like they were somebody. But that regret doesn't save them. For a narcissist, regret doesn't lead to awakening, it leads to obsession. They will try to find you in everyone they meet. A smile that resembles yours, a familiar voice, a scent on the wind, everything sends them back to the beginning. But no matter how hard they try, they cannot find that light, because it didn't come from you with them. It came from you being you. Jung once said, The person who does not turn inward will forever run around the world seeking what they lost within their own soul. The narcissist is the living picture of that truth. They run, seek, conquer, but never stop long enough to look into the very pit they dug. Every new relationship is a faded copy of the old play. Every new betrayal is a desperate attempt to prove they still control what they already lost themselves. Meanwhile, you enter a different chapter. The silence that once hurt becomes the language of freedom. You no longer need to explain, to prove, or to play the healer. You learn that sometimes love isn't about holding on, but about letting go so both can see the truth. And when you choose peace over victory, you step out of their labyrinth. Their collapse unfolds alongside your resurrection. While they claw at an illusion, you rebuild reality. While they try to convince others they're fine, you have nothing left to prove. While they live in memory, you live in awareness. In the end, your silence becomes the true mirror, not reflecting them anymore, but reflecting you, calm, awake, sovereign. And that is what they will never understand, that victory isn't making someone regret you. It's no longer needing their regret at all. In the narcissist world, everything is sustained by reaction. In the world you've entered, everything begins with awareness. One side collapses from losing control. The other is reborn by finally learning self-mastery. And in that silence, everything ends not with a bang, but with a deep breath. I am back. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. When regret becomes their prison, and freedom becomes your home. After the masks have fallen, and the stage lights have gone out, the narcissist is left alone in an empty room. No applause, no audience, no reactions to cling to, and in that silence, regret slips in. But it isn't the regret of someone who knows how to love. There is no contrition, no compassion. It is the bewilderment of someone who has just realized that the world keeps turning, only it no longer revolves around them. They try to flee the void. They throw themselves into work, hunt for new supply, post photos of counterfeit happiness. They look for new people to convince themselves they still have value. Yet wherever they go, they carry your ghost. Not because you were perfect, but because you were the last person who made them feel real. And for someone addicted to illusion, that is a high that can't be replaced. The more they deny it, the more haunted they become. A song, a fragrance, a passing voice, each becomes a small door back to the past they burned. They won't say it aloud, but at night they remember the moments when you looked at them as if redemption was still possible. They remember how you believed, how you forgave, how you touched them, not with need, but with kindness. And then they feel themselves shrinking, not because they lost you, but because for the first time they face the feeling of being unseen. From there, their regret stops being an emotion and becomes an inner prison. They live in the past, where you still love them. Everyone they meet afterward is compared and found lacking, not deep enough, not true enough, not bright enough. And though they deny it, they know. They threw away their only chance to touch something real. They can rebuild an image, but not a soul. They can attract attention, but never recover the peace you once carried into the room. For you, the path bends the other way. As they collapse into regret, you rise in understanding. You no longer see love as a place to prove worth, but as a space to exist freely. You understand that goodness doesn't have to be paid for with pain. Your silence is no longer a defensive wall. It's the ground on which a new peace is built. You don't need to win them, because there is no battle left to win. The truest revenge isn't their suffering. It's your lack of interest. While they remain trapped in the loop of shadow comparison, nostalgia, denial, you've left the maze, carrying the lesson without carrying the bitterness. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." You chose acceptance that they cannot love you the way you once hoped, that they cannot become anyone but themselves. And once you accept that, you no longer need to control the outcome. You let them live with their consequences, and you step into a new chapter of freedom. This freedom is not loud. It isn't laughing in a crowd or rushing into a new romance. It is the morning you wake and realize you didn't think of them. It is the moment you no longer need to explain the past. It is the quiet of ordinary things, sunlight, music, the smell of coffee. It is a freedom no manipulator can ever take back. While they try to recreate an old version of you in someone else, you become a new version of yourself, whole, awake, unafraid of loss. You understand that real love never requires you to shrink to be accepted. Real love doesn't need theatrics to feel true. It is calm, simple, and clear as early light. As for them, they wander the long night of an ego never healed, carrying a memory they both worship and despise. The memory of you, the one who loved them with truth. And that is the longest sentence they will ever serve, not punishment from you, but from their memory of what they destroyed. You, after all of it, don't need to witness their collapse. Because you no longer live to be seen by them, you live to truly see yourself. And in that still world, where you no longer react, only one sound rings the clearest, your footsteps moving away, gentle, decisive, free. Chapter 5, Transcendence. When love returns to its purest form, awareness, time passes, and you realize the deepest truth of all. The narcissist was never your destiny. They were merely the mirror that showed you the part of yourself you had long abandoned. That encounter, however brutal, was in fact a sacred initiation of the soul. They were the lesson, not the tragedy. They did not come to teach you about their version of love, but to help you understand yours. After years of exhaustion from trying to heal others, you begin to return to the only place you never truly left yourself. You look back on everything not through the eyes of a victim, but through the eyes of a witness. You see clearly how you once reacted, once tried to prove your worth, once feared being left behind. And then you smile not with pride, but with understanding. Everything had a reason for happening exactly the way it did. When you've moved beyond the emotional whirlwind, when pain no longer demands a name, love inside you begins to change form from emotion to awareness. It's no longer something to be given or taken, but an energy flowing through you, unattached. You love without clinging, you care without controlling, you see without possessing. And it's in this state that you finally grasp Jung's words. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You no longer call that relationship a wrong destiny. It was part of the process of individuation, the soul's journey through darkness to recognize its own light. Darkness was never the enemy, it was the doorway. And once you're brave enough to walk through it without running, it no longer controls you. The narcissist, meanwhile, remains trapped in the labyrinth of self-image, running from reflection to reflection, trying to feel alive through repeated stories. But you know now, that is no longer your concern. You left that maze not in anger, but in stillness. There was no victory, no defeat, only liberation. This liberation did not come from forgiving them, but from no longer resisting the truth. You don't need their remorse to be at peace. Your peace no longer depends on who understands or believes you. It comes from your own understanding of yourself. You don't need their love to feel enough, because you have become the source of your own light. The truth is, what the narcissist never understood is that you never belonged to them. The love they believed they possessed was never yours to give away. It was the love you carried for life itself, for truth, for the sacred. They merely stood near that light for a while, long enough to see themselves shine, but never long enough to hold it, because that light cannot be owned. It can only radiate when it is lived. Now, when you look back, you no longer see them as the enemy. You see a wounded soul governed by a darkness they lacked the courage to face. And instead of anger, you feel clarity, the simple recognition that you chose to look inward while they chose to run outward. That is why you are free, and they remain imprisoned by their own regret. Love, at last, returns to its original form, the light of consciousness. It is no longer I love you, but I understand myself, and therefore I can love. You no longer need to be seen because you already see yourself. You no longer need to prove anything because your presence itself is proof. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And indeed, You have walked through the darkness not to destroy it, but to realize that light and darkness are but two breaths of the same soul. At this final chapter of the journey, you no longer need an audience, a villain, or a them to define you. You need only yourself whole, awake, and free. Because once you have moved through pain and looked at it through the eyes of awareness, you understand the simplest, most profound truth. True love is not something you find in another person. It is something you become.